The BC government, like all governments these days, always tries to bury the bad news. And just before Christmas, in the dark days of December, it's the best time to bury your bad news and make your announcements when few people are paying too much attention. The Liberals made several announcements just before Christmas, and one surprising one, that the projected cost of the Site C Dam on the Peace River has gone up by a lot, by $1 billion. And that the government is going ahead anyway. One prominent critic of the project is Damien Gillis, who is editor of the CommonSenseCanadian.ca, a great online magazine of environmental news. Gillis is also a documentary filmmaker, and he has been following the Site C Dam controversy closely for a long time. I spoke with Damien earlier today.
Hi, Keith.
So, just before Christmas, in the dark days of December, the provincial government announced that they were approving the Site C Dam project on the Peace River. Were you surprised that they announced it?
Not particularly. I was predicting that they would, that there'd be some sort of conditions attached to it. It was interesting at the last minute because the finance minister, Mike de Jong, took a last-minute trip to Toronto to plead the province's case with the credit rating agencies and try to hang on to our AAA credit rating, which was evidently in jeopardy based on this being such an expensive project. It went up by almost another $1 billion in the final days leading up to the announcement. It's now close to $9 billion, would be the most expensive capital project ever undertaken in sort of today's dollar terms by any province in Canada. And so there clearly was some real shakiness around the financial situation that introduced a bit of intrigue before the announcement. But otherwise, certainly everything has been trending in this direction, and this government has really seemed unwilling to shift its view of this project despite any of the new facts that have come to light or the change of situation. This dam's been on the books for close to 4 decades now. It's been brought up and failed on several occasions previously, and those relate to many of the same issues that we're dealing with today. There are certainly many other alternatives that have come online, much more cost-effective than they were before, that this government refused to look at. And also, our demand for power in BC has really leveled off, and BC Hydro has a long history of overestimating demand. And so we can see that there's been the whole need for this project has really been thrown into question in recent years. But none of that has seemed to deter the government. So I was not surprised by the announcement.
So it's been through the environmental assessment and the assessments, and it's cleared those hurdles. I think they want to begin building this summer. Is it a done deal?
I don't think it's a done deal. First of all, there are 6 different lawsuits brought by three parties in both provincial and federal court. So there's the Alberta Treaty 8 First Nations, the BC Treaty 8 First Nations, and also the Landowners Association, Peace Valley Landowners Association, which represents farmers. And I should mention that my own family settled in the Peace Valley over 100 years ago, and we already lost our ranch in 1968 to the first big dam up there, WAC Bennett Dam. But many of these pioneer families I still know, and my family knows. I didn't grow up in the valley, but I spent pretty much being up there every year of my life. So, I really sympathize with these folks who have been farming in the region for a long time, and we learned throughout the Joint Review Panel from expert testimony, some of the top agrologists in Canada, that said this is some of the best farmland that we have in Canada. We have a real deficit of food self-sufficiency in BC. We only grow less than 50% of the food we consume here, and we're really depending on imports from places like California, which is in a drought situation, and
right.
We're seeing food prices go up. So all of these things, come into play. But these landowners, they have a pretty strong case that's being brought by a lawyer named Rob Bottrell, who's a former comptroller for TD Bank, BC, and a very seasoned energy and economic expert. And so those cases are winding their way through the courts, And there are these ongoing issues with the cost. The plans haven't been finalized. There's still a lot of questions about the design. There's still questions about the cost. And this is a government that has presided over serious capital cost overruns with pretty much every project that it's overseen in its tenure. Often big projects double in cost, and they're in the low billions. This one has the potential to go really off the rails and take the whole province's fiscal situation with it. So there are so many question marks still, and particularly those legal threats, that I don't think it's by any means a done deal at this point.
So what's driving the BC government? Because it looks like, as you say, our electrical demand is leveled off. It doesn't look like we need the electricity. It doesn't look like it can be used to pump or compress LNG. They say they might want to sell it to California, but why are they taking up this huge debt risk for this project? What's driving the government, do you think, to do this?
That's the $9 billion question, or maybe $15 billion question. Like you say, the justification has changed on multiple occasions. First of all, we were told this was to power 450,000 homes in BC. That justification has disappeared. We're now firmly a net exporter of power in BC, and we show no signs of changing on that front. The next justification we heard was that it was to provide some of the enormous energy needs for cooling gas into liquid for this proposed LNG project, and multiple plants proposed on the coast. They are so energy intensive that Site C, the power from Site C, would barely supply one of the larger plants. So also it'll be at a cost where it's much cheaper for these companies to just burn some of their gas to create electricity.
Right.
And because they get special treatment, essentially the government has backed down on its Clean Energy Act and allowed new gas-fired electrical plants only in Kitimat and Prince Rupert if you're building an LNG plant. So it's just sort of totally changing its climate policy, and we could see a 2 to 3-fold increase in the entire carbon footprint of BC as a result of that. So because that gas is a lot cheaper than it would be to buy new power from BC Hydro, it's very unlikely that this project has really anything to do with LNG at this point. And Premier Clark even acknowledged that only just 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks before, the project was approved to Bloomberg. The other thing that came out of the joint review panel was another excuse that we were going to, from BC Hydro, that this was to free up excess power to export to California. Problem is that would be a losing proposition for us right now. The spot market across the border, power trades pretty typically for $30 to $35 a unit. That's been doing it for a long time. This new power would cost us $100 a unit. So the former head of the Major Power Users Association of BC, Dan Potts, has predicted that on that basis, Site C will run a $350 million a year operating loss for BC ratepayers and taxpayers. So if that's our strategy, if that's the reason to export power to California, well, that's a pretty boneheaded move. The other, hypotheses that I can come up with are, one, I think there's a lot of sort of institutional momentum to build this project. It's the last big project on the books. Like I say, it's close to 40 years it's been planned by BC Hydro. This is their last big hurrah. This provincial government seems to have had this on its agenda since before it even came to power. And you could say that they're obsessed with building it. I think there is a lot of money here to be made by construction companies and engineering firms, many of whom have donated largely to this BC Liberal government. So when you've made promises to your friends and to get the contracts to build, and because this government doesn't sign fixed price contracts we've seen for many other projects, the cost going up is really not a problem for these companies. In fact, that just puts more money in their pocket. So this idea that this thing is going to cost a lot of money, that somebody's going to benefit from that. I'm just spitballing though, because to answer your question, it's really, there is no good reason for building this project. So we're left to wonder about all the sort of potential bad reasons that there are, and to sift through the fact that this story has changed so many times.
About why we need it, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the really big thing and a big piece of these lawsuits rests on this particular point. We have an independent arm's reach regulator, energy regulator in BC called the BC Utilities Commission. It was created specifically for the purpose of reviewing projects like Site C as to the economics of them and the need and value to ratepayers and taxpayers in BC. And this government, right from the get-go on Site C, removed the BC Utilities Commission from its oversight. Now, I mean, that is just a really puzzling action. Why would you ever, and it's fishy, any time that a government steps in and takes an independent regulator out of the equation, it really should raise red flags. And the fact that they did that meant this project never received any real independent investigation as to its need. And that was something that the Joint Review Panel singled out in its report. It didn't recommend for or against the project, but it did list some of the potential advantages of it and a long list of problems with it. And those included that the need had never been demonstrated, the regulator had been removed from the equation, and also all these questions about the cost of the project, what kind of economic impact it would have on BC, how it would affect our credit rating. None of this had been sufficiently studied. And so when the government got this report back from the Joint Review Panel, it decided to ignore large swaths of the panel's recommendations. It decided to essentially just completely ignore all of these misgivings that it had about need and the financial issues surrounding it. And in doing so, it violated its own terms of reference that it created for that panel. It directed the panel to examine those things and report back on them. And when it did, and the government didn't like the answers it got, it summarily, discounted them. And that's the basis for these lawsuits, is that the government essentially did not have the right or the power to overlook those very glaring issues out of the review panel's report. And on that basis, it should not have issued the environmental certificates for the project. And that's what Mr. Bottrell and the landowners are going to court over, is to get that environmental certificate issued by the government revoked in court.
Well, that's the legal case, yeah. Politically, do they stand to gain? Will this cause a short-term economic boom in jobs as well? Something that would run perhaps to the next election, and then the long-term costs and potential bankruptcy for the province are way down the road. Is that politically how it's structured for the provincial government?
Yeah, I think you hit on an important point that we didn't cover in the kind of list of possible reasons why you'd want to build this crazy thing. This government does seem to really like big ticket projects like the LNG industry, which was really what it ran its last election on. And of course, we haven't seen any of those jobs yet or that industry materialize. And Site C does have that sort of, is the way it was presented in the press conference when they announced their decision. It was sort of presented in that vein, that this was going to be good for the economy. It was going to create a lot of jobs. As you noted, they'll be very short-term. A lot of them will be imported. We don't have the workforce. We're kind of at full employment in the Northeast right now. These LNG deals, we were promised all these jobs. The government has signed deals with India and China to import foreign temporary workers to build the industry. Malaysia's Petronas, probably the biggest player in the LNG race, they've indicated that they would be importing Malaysian laborers to build their pipeline and plant. We see the same thing with pipeline building projects and smaller hydro projects, private power projects, huge importation. And I visited many of those construction sites, more so I think than anybody did in BC during that whole IPP deal, and made a number of documentaries on that. And I can tell you that there were very few workers from BC. There was a lot of accents that I encountered, people from Newfoundland and Quebec and Saskatchewan and all across the country. So we can expect the same sort of thing here. The local labor benefits will be much less than what is being stated. They will be short-term. It will bring in a huge boom and bust into those local communities, which brings with it a lot of problems, infrastructure shortages, hospitals, roads, etc. These local communities are very concerned. There is no real plan for how to accommodate this huge influx of workers that are going to be imported for this. So, is that a great benefit? And then, yes, I think you're right. This government has done a very good job of sweeping under the rug and hiding for the time being the enormous fiscal damage it's doing to this province. They have, in real terms, if you count all the taxpayer obligations, the private power contracts, the P3 highway building and management contracts, the cost overruns at BC Hydro, their huge debt. This government has added fivefold to our real debt and obligations in BC since it came to power. They brand themselves as shrewd fiscal managers and economic gurus, and what they have done, their track record on paper is far worse than what their NDP predecessors could have ever even dreamed of. And I do believe that the fact that this has yet to catch up with them, it didn't even catch up with them in the last election, would suggest, yeah, you build this dam, it goes to $15 or $20 billion plus financing costs. Our debts and obligations go over $200 billion in BC. That's a very real scenario over the next decade. We lose our AAA credit rating. All these things, I think, are bound to happen on the horizon, but they may yet be able to get away with it, or at least punt the problem off into the distance.
So we would essentially go deeply in debt to buy some very expensive short-term jobs with little long-term benefit. And I wonder, has anybody done a calculation of how much, if they created 5,000 jobs, how much each job would be worth, total?
Well, no, they're not that I'm
but
sure
even
there are some studies to that effect, but part of the issue here is they're worth a lot more if they're actually British Columbians that are going to pay local taxes on that wage that they're getting.
Right.
This won't be the case
right.
here. It's not going to be the case in the LNG industry. It's very, very clear. They made promises of something up to 60 to 100,000 jobs for British Columbians in LNG. That's never going to happen. It's never even going to come close to happening. It won't even be a 10th or a 20th or a 50th of that if a single plant even gets built. And there's no indication that that's even going to happen. So I think that it's amazing the power that this sort of, you just need to use the word jobs. You don't need to back it up. You don't need to get specific about what comes from that. And certainly, if we were to create solid, sustainable, long-term industries and sectors in BC that would provide local employment, yes, there's a huge benefit to our tax coffers and our local communities. But that's not the way that these big buck short-term projects work.
So, Damien, I just have a couple more questions. One I wanted to ask you is how much of the valley gets flooded? What's sort of can we sort of discuss sort of the land area, like the beautiful Peace River Valley?
Yeah.
How big a reservoir is this? How long is it? Is it going to?
Well, it's about 80 kilometers long,
right.
And as far as how much is flooded, that's a really interesting question, because as my family and others can tell you who have lost their land to previous dams in this region, there's a tremendous amount of erosion. My grandfather's property was not supposed to be flooded in 1968, but the water line kept moving up, and he eventually secured some compensation from the government, but that property was forsaken. It was lost. It wasn't supposed to be, and that's a common trend with dams. And the Williston Reservoir area is much more solid ground compared to further up the valley. East in the valley towards Fort St. John, the stretch between Hudson's Hope and Fort St. John that would be flooded for Site C, is a very shale and clay and silt, composed valley. And anybody who can tell you, or that lives there can tell you, or the farmers, the ranchers, the landowners there, they know how much these banks slough. There's been major landslides there historically that have wreaked havoc on the valley and the people that live there. And so it's really hard to say this dam, what the footprint will be in the end, because it will gobble up a lot more land than what is initially contemplated. And I think we can be sure of that. the figures that came from these expert agrologists that presented at the hearings, approximately 30,000 acres of some of the best farmland in Canada that would be either flooded or disrupted to an extent that it can't be farmed anymore. Once you start putting access roads and all sorts of things in that segment up property, and you have this risk of future flooding and things, that piece of land becomes basically moot. You can't invest in equipment and really develop it because it's too uncertain, it's too inaccessible, etc. So what we're really losing here is about 30,000 acres of really good farmland, and according to these agrologists, it's enough to feed, if it were fully developed, that's enough to feed 1 million people. This is also very important, which is almost a quarter of the population of BC. This is also very important traditional territory for local First Nations. They've indicated this is absolutely, after all they've suffered in terms of these previous dams, all the shale gas development, all the logging, the mining, the roads, over the years they've lost so much of what they were promised in their treaty. We have a fiduciary obligation as a province and as a crown to uphold their ability, their right to live their traditional life on the land. That was what they were promised when they gave up some of that land and those rights. They were still supposed to be able to live out their traditions unimpeded, and we've gone way overboard on that. So what they're saying is this is kind of the last little gem that we have here, and you're going to take that away too. And that's the basis for their lawsuits. And it's also very important wildlife habitat. This is according to a study done by the David Suzuki Foundation using satellite imagery and aerial photos from the last 40 years. 67% of that Peace Valley region has been heavily industrialized. In some cases, it's layer upon layer of development. It's one of the most industrialized rural areas in the world, and now we're going to add this on top of that. It really doesn't make sense, especially when you consider that it's a losing proposition for taxpayers and ratepayers.
Damien, what can we do about it? This is going to be an issue this year. We hope, we expect. It's a huge public decision for BC. And it affects all of us, as you made very clear. We're all going to bear that debt forever. Where's the pressure point that people here in southern BC can come into play on this?
Well, I think there's always a need for bringing it up in your local media like you're doing right now, but this should be something that's in the letters to the editor and in your local papers there. This particularly that angle of, I think people in the Kootenays can understand issues of food security.
Sure.
But I also think that the debt and the cost that you guys will all be paying through your tax dollars and your much higher power bills over the years, that's a big issue. You also have made big sacrifices in that region in terms of dams in the past, and can hopefully relate to what some of these landowners in the region are going through.
That's true, David.
Yeah,
yep.
and so you have energy minister in one of your local ridings there. He should be hearing from people absolutely on a daily basis what a boneheaded idea this is. I think this government is very vulnerable on fiscal matters because that's its core brand. That's how it presents itself to the world. And so hammer away on that issue of $9 billion. Where does it go from here? How is this going to affect our credit rating? This is we don't need this power. You've taken the regulator out of the equation. These are some of the themes that they need to be hearing. I also think that these landowners are going to need support in their lawsuit. I don't have the exact link on here, but hopefully
we'll find it.
We'll
find it. Yeah.
Because there is a place where you can donate and support that case. They're really the front end of the tip of the spear right now. In this case, they probably have the best chance of going to court in April, in provincial court, to try to get the environmental certificate revoked. I would suggest, because this is such a bad idea and the financial case for it just keeps getting worse, anything that can be done to delay this another year. I mean, this thing has essentially been delayed for 40 years now. And this isn't the first time that it's been approved or there's been a strong interest in pursuing it by the government, and it hasn't happened. That's, in fact, been the rule with this project historically. it seems to have like some sort of a curse on it or something. But so let's keep rolling with that and do anything we can to hold it up. And at the same time, I would say be writing to politicians in Victoria and let them know that their vote in the next election is going to be potentially is going to be influenced by this and their record of poor fiscal management that they're showing.
Excellent, Damien. Well, thanks very much for coming on the Ecocentric. This is a big topic for all of BC, and you've done a great job of laying out the issue. Thank you very much, Damien.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you again.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.